By the time I got back to my dorm, it was late at night. Usually, there should be 4 of us, but one went out for an internship and had been gone for about a week. As medical students, we often go to remote mountain villages for inspection, but this time it seemed like the trip had taken unusually long. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the door opening. It was faint, lasted for a while, then stopped. Confused, I then heard the sound of something falling outside the door. I hurriedly got out of bed, opened the door, and to my surprise, it was David, who had gone out for the inspection. "Hey, are you alright?" I nudged his body and grabbed my phone from my pocket, ready to call for help when suddenly, he grabbed my hand with all his strength and gasped, "Blood, blood." After that, he lost consciousness. The school took David's body away. On that night, I witnessed the most bizarre scene of my life. Someone who went out for inspection suddenly appeared in the dorm, and after leaving what seemed like a cryptic sign, he died. The place where David went for inspection had rumors of being strange, with claims that there was an infectious disease in the village, but it had been too remote to receive effective treatment. Our school had set it up as an inspection site, and David's group was the first batch. After David's incident, the situation of the village became a mystery. However, some say that David had actually been dead for several days. It is said that David's body was dissected the same evening, revealing shocking conditions inside. The body was in a severe state of decomposition, indicative of death several days prior. How did a dead person come back? Now, I can't even begin to contemplate these problems, as I'm set to depart tomorrow. But lying in my bed, I still can't sleep. The other 2 people in the dorm are asleep, with only the sound of a vibrating phone breaking the silence. I searched and found it was David's phone, which had fallen on the floor that night, and I had picked it up. It was a multimedia message from someone named Eric, who seemed to be the student who went for inspection with David. "Have you gone back? Call for help quickly. I know what happened here now. They are still after me, I won't last much longer." Below the text was an inserted image. It was unclear, probably taken hastily with a mobile phone. An open space, crowded with many figures standing close together. The darkness was too deep to see clearly, but all their eyes shone brightly. Like the eyes of a beast at night, they flickered with a terrifying red glow. Elmshire is a remote mountainous region, nestled against the hills, with rather inconvenient transport access. This bus ride was even more jolting than I had imagined. After an hour weaving into the mountains, the bus finally came to a slow stop. After getting off, the bus slowly revved up and eventually disappeared into the rainy night from whence it came. I had finally arrived. Looking up, I saw a sign that read, "Elmshire." It seemed I was indeed in the right place. However, it was already past 8 p.m., and the village was eerily quiet. Perhaps that's normal for the countryside, with farmers tending to sleep early. I quickly darted into the village, seeking shelter from the rain under a house eave. Not far off, there seemed to be a figure, one without an umbrella. But before I could hail them, the silhouette vanished. Still puzzled, I felt a tap on my shoulder, and turning around, I found myself facing a country girl. "You're an intern too, right?" she suddenly asked. "Yes," I replied. My professor had informed me that someone would meet me, and this girl must be the one. "Hi, you can call me Emily. You'll sleep at my house tonight, I'll show you the way," she said, handing me an umbrella and slowly walking into the rain. It seemed the other interns were faring well if they had such a pretty girl accompanying them. I thought to myself with a hint of envy, only to suddenly realize that the area was filled with passing dark figures carrying something. When the wind blew, a corner of the cloth covering the top was lifted. It was a corpse. "Emily, are those people villagers?" I asked after we turned a few corners. "Are they?" Emily turned to look back at me. I must have been overreacting. The desolate village appeared to have just the 2 of us, the silence was maddening, and apart from the lifeless houses, there was nothing else. She pointed towards a not-so-distant house and hurried over. Emily also had a father. They weren't natives of the village but had lived there for quite some time. After settling in, I asked them about the village. "Uncle Joe, do you remember the last intern who came here? Where are they now?" Joe glanced outside the window and retorted, "Didn't they all go back? That's why you came, right?" As I was about to speak, I suddenly heard noises from outside. A commotion seemed to be coming from the bushes. Joe continued, "Do your research here, but remember, don't go to that house in the center of the village. It's for our village rituals, and outsiders are not allowed near." I acknowledged and continued to make small talk. Around 10, I yawned and retired to my room for the night. With virtually no cell signal, I was effectively cut off from the outside world. Digging out a professional geological map from my pack, I tried to locate the village, but there was no sign of any settlement nearby on the map. Screams erupted from outside, one after another, for several minutes until finally, silence returned. As I wondered, the door suddenly swung open, and a dark figure crept onto the floor. Startled for a moment, the shadow lunged at me. Grasping my phone, the dim light revealed a face, a person's face. He pinned me down, teeth aiming for my neck. I dodged quickly, and his teeth sank into my shoulder, splattering blood. As if stimulated by the fresh blood, the figure bit at my head again. There was no chance to dodge this time. Suddenly the person slid off me, and standing behind him was Joe. Joe flicked the blood off his axe and hoisted the body onto his shoulders. "You need to leave here tomorrow, you shouldn't have come." That night I didn't sleep well. I persisted until the next day, without daring to ask any questions, and quickly packed up my belongings. Emily entered my room. "Why are you leaving?" "Ah, there's a sudden emergency at home, I must go back," I lied, something I wasn't accustomed to, but she didn't seem to suspect anything. "But the bus won't come until tomorrow," she said earnestly. "It's quite remote here, so the bus only comes every other day." "What exactly happened here?" "Yesterday I fell victim to an attack. He tried to kill me, and luckily your father intervened in time, or else I would have been dead," I said. "My father? You must be joking, he's been dead for years," Emily responded. I was shocked, "But someone was really killed in my room last night. Look at the ground," I said, glancing down, only to suddenly realize that the bloodstains that had been on the floor were gone. "There's no one in this village." That was the only impression I had when I strolled around the village in the morning. It felt like I was the only person on the deserted streets. Every house was locked up tight, with earthen mounds resembling graves in front of each door. After looking at a few houses, I finally reached the center of the village. That's the place Joe told me not to go to yesterday. The building resembled a massive warehouse with no windows, a sealed iron box, completely concealing its contents from view. After walking around it and finding nothing, about to leave, the place struck me as familiar. It was that photo. I took out David's phone, rummaged for the picture, and became even more certain after comparing them. The scene in Eric's photo was taken here. When I came back around, Emily had already prepared lunch. "Emily, is there no one in this village?" She glanced at me. "I'll be honest with you, the people in this village have a strange disease. They usually don't come out in the morning, only at night." My gaze fell to the corner, and I shuddered. There was a cigarette butt. "Emily, has anyone been here today?" I asked cautiously. She looked at me curiously and slowly said, "No." "Why?" "Nothing," I feigned a smile. I even speculated Joe wasn't dead for years but was killed last night instead. Picking up the cigarette butt from under the bed, the saliva traces were clear. It could be inferred that Joe's words last night were just to deal with the lurking enemies, and Eric was still in this cursed place. Perhaps finding him would unveil all the truths here. That left the most likely place, there. Through the window, I gazed at the impenetrable forbidden area at the village center. The knock on the door sounded and Emily walked in. With some hesitation, she said, "Weren't you here to investigate?" I can take you to the village head's house, he has many historical records about the village. That would be great, I replied eagerly. We set off on the desolate country road, whose silence now seemed eerie. After a while, she stopped in front of a house. Go inside. I have other things to do. I hesitated but played tough and went in. Village head Smith led me to the back room where some books were already laid out on the table. I heard him say somberly, "So you're staying at Emily's, huh? Life hasn't been easy for her, being an only child, and losing her father early on." I sighed in agreement. Village head, tonight's. Just then, a voice came from outside. Village head Smith excused himself and left the back room. I sneakily followed and eavesdropped from behind the door. The person was speaking an incomprehensible language with his back to me. After a while, Village head Smith nodded, and the person turned to leave. That's when I finally saw his face. My world turned upside down. He had a long scar on the back of his neck, left by Joe's axe the night before. He was supposed to be dead. Rushing back to the desk, I listened as footsteps grew nearer. The sound lingered at the door before fading away. Seemed like it's gone. I breathed a sigh of relief, looking at the stack of documents on the desk. The papers said that the villagers had contracted a strange genetic disease a year ago, photophobia. They thought they were possessed and held exorcisms annually. The form of exorcism was a living sacrifice. When I got back to Emily's house, she sat at the doorstep, lost in thought. "It's time you told me the truth," I said softly after making sure no one else was around. "What truth?" Her eyes shifted. "Was Joe killed last night? Today I found cigarette butts in the corner, but you told me no one had come over." "It was the same last night. Joe said that the college students had gone back, but there was someone listening outside, so Joe didn't tell the truth." "What exactly is happening here? You're not locals, so why stay in this cursed place?" Not all my questions, but it was time for some answers. Emily suddenly burst into tears, beckoned me inside, and locked the door behind us. "This place isn't really a village for the living. My father and I moved here a year ago. This place wasn't originally called Elmshire but Dead Spirit Village, a village cursed." She paused to regain composure and continued, "My father was a doctor interested in the disease, so he came to investigate. At first, the villagers were friendly, but over time, we'd often hear screams from the central warehouse. Father seemed to have discovered something crucial, but that's when the villagers wouldn't let us leave. They detained us, asking for help with receiving visitors. But Father refused to listen and often helped the outsiders to leave. So, those college students never left the village." She nodded vigorously, went to the back room, and returned with a handwritten notebook. They were taken to the central warehouse. "This is my father's," he said. "It must be passed to someone on the outside. It contains the secrets he discovered." I flipped through the notebook, but the last few pages were torn out. The notebook revealed that all villagers had died of a plague a year ago. So, what were the villagers I saw? All the answers seemed to wait for the night. At midnight, I watched as more and more shadows appeared outside the window, marching through the darkness like zombies towards the center of the village. I stealthily hid in the bushes nearby and followed them. They lined up neatly in the clearing in front of the warehouse, with Village Head Smith from this morning standing on a platform at the front. They stood motionless, countless pairs of red eyes flickering on and off in the darkness. It was exactly like the photo Eric had taken. I felt fearful, then something was thrown from the stage, the villagers swarmed towards it, and the piercing screams followed. Was this the so-called living sacrifice? I circled around to the back door of the warehouse and slipped inside. It was dark with large and small metal boxes everywhere, thick pipes connecting them all in every direction. Inside were living people, their breath slowly coming out of their mouths and fogging up the glass surfaces. While trying to keep my shaking body under control, I looked for Eric. In the last row of boxes, I found him. The glass was shattered, and Eric, trembling, looked at me almost in despair. "Are you Eric?" Although I had only looked at his photo before leaving, his image was deeply etched in my mind. He was the only one who could tell me the whole truth. He nodded weakly, his naked body covered with marks from needles. "What exactly is happening here?" "It's a parasite that feeds on human blood, yet somehow preserves the body from decaying." Then I suddenly remembered the cryptic code David had given before his death. It was this: "We've been surveying here for days, and never saw any villagers in the morning, but they come out at night." So, one night, we knocked out a villager, drew some blood, and did a basic test. The blood in his veins was full of those mysterious parasites. We wanted to tell the teacher with us, but then he disappeared. Do you know why this village is so silent? It's because they consume all the living creatures around. On a night sometime later, they held a living sacrifice, and the offering was that teacher. He was consumed too. And what is this place for? They imprison tourists and students who've strayed here, farming them to sustain the villagers with food, which is fresh human blood. This revelation made me gasp. David escaped with Joe's help. I got caught. But not all ways out are gone. He paused and whispered softly. Joe found a mysterious seed, and he hid it in his house. It said that eating it prevents the infection from these parasites, but we never found it. Right, Emily might know where it is. Suddenly, I felt a glimmer of hope for survival. Emily? Was she the one who came with you? He asked, puzzled. Joe's daughter. There's no one else in Joe's house, no daughter, he said emphatically. Suddenly, the silence of the warehouse was broken by soft footsteps. In the next second, Emily stood in front of me. Run! Before I could comprehend what was happening, she grabbed my hand and sprinted towards the door. Behind us, the villagers' bodies instantly filled the warehouse, submerging Eric in a sea of people. We need to escape the village now, or it'll be too late. No, to your house. We returned to her house and tightly locked the door. It wasn't long before the villagers crowded the courtyard, their pounding on the door echoing our racing hearts. Your father must have found a way to deal with these villagers. Why didn't you tell me? That thing is not for ordinary people to handle. We tried before. It affects not just these villagers but normal people too. What effect? I watched her walk into another room and followed. She opened a cabinet, a golden seed lay there quietly. That's the fate of the one called David, drained of all blood, an undead being, she said calmly. So, the final question, who are you exactly? All my doubts were resolved. Who I am does not matter. She watched me slowly place the seed into my mouth and said with a sorrowful laugh, what matters is they are already here. Roars came from outside, the small room filled up. I snatched the seed and swallowed it. Just then, the door burst open. The person ahead laughed, the real sacrifice is finally complete. That person was Eric. It seems the truth is indeed what I least wanted to see. So, please tell me, what exactly happens when you take this seed? I gave a bitter smile, looking at Emily beside me. You and this seed will vanish together, and after that, it will be the reign of the undead. So that's how it is. Everything's clear now. I always wondered how you managed to send a multimedia message in a place with no signal, and how David escaped on his own. Enlighten me. I think it's because you followed David back to the school and then sent the multimedia message. I suspect after you came to the village, you discovered the villagers' secret as well as the secret of the seed. You claimed you never found it, but there can be no worse lie. You were smart, letting David test it out first, and he was immediately affected. Yes, I made a deal with them, bringing them more subjects to test on. I let David escape on purpose to lure more people here. And yet, Joe had this trump card, why didn't he use it? That puzzled me for a long time, until I read the records at the village head's house. This village was struck by a plague a few years ago, and Joe's family came to investigate a year ago. just when the dead began to rise. So, considering all the previous facts, the answer becomes clear. Eric's smile stiffened. That's because the first to be infected was Joe's daughter. Even though Joe knew the seed could kill these undead, he didn't want to lose his daughter, which made him give up. That's why he managed to live in this village for so long. Actually, you got one thing wrong. It wasn't because of the seed, but because he was the only one not affected by it. Before you came, the villagers had to keep this hope until they found the next unaffected person. When you arrived, we discovered that you could see the host which no one else could. So we bet everything on you. We killed the guy that night and staged the whole play with you. But, judging by the results, it is quite satisfactory. The figure I saw on the night I arrived was you, and you tore off the last few pages of Joe's notes. He nodded confidently. After you arrived in this village, you've been under surveillance. The last pages of Joe's notes were about how to use the seed. Everything tonight, showing you me, letting you run here and swallow the seed, was all planned. I'm not ready to die just yet. I took out the seed that I kept in my mouth. You actually. He said in amazement, but we have more people. It's time to end this. Emily's voice came from the side. She suddenly grabbed my hand, and as it swung, the seed slipped into her mouth. In an instant, the villagers lying in front of me fell one by one. I watched Eric desperately clutching his hair, eventually turning into a dry corpse. I've wanted to do this for a long time. My father didn't want me to vanish, so he'd rather risk his life to send the tourists who strayed into Dead Spirit Village away. Thank you for helping me end it all. I've been waiting for someone who could put the seed into me. If I touched the seed, then this last hope would disappear. My dad must be waiting for me now. Goodbye. Her body gradually became transparent and eventually vanished under the first light of dawn. As I walked along the path of Evil Spirit Village once again, the village had regained its silence from when I first came. Sitting on the bus heading home, looking back at the village, there was a strange feeling. Did all of this really happen? Maybe, but at least some people can finally rest in peace now.